Hello, welcome to Your Watershed Home, a feature about protecting life and property and protecting water, soil, and living things in your local communities in the Ausable Bayfield watershed. My name is Tim Cumming. I'm a communications specialist. I'm very lucky to have with me a special guest today, Davin Heinbuck. And Davin is Water Resources Coordinator with Ausable Bayfield Conservation Authority, or ABCA. Welcome, Davin. How are you today?
Good, Tim. Thank you.
Now, last time we talked, you talked to us about when there is too much water too fast. You talked to us about flood forecasting and warning. But I understand today you're talking about something different. You're talking about when there isn't enough water, when there's drought or low water, and how you respond, the low water response and drought program. So tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, I'll start kind of back to the creation of the program. It started in 2001. It's a partnership between several ministries and the conservation authorities to set up watershed response teams. And the watershed response team is made up of the local industries or water users that are predominantly have the permit to take water, designed to have them be part of the decision-making process on ways to conserve water usage during dry periods.
So who would be involved in this? Well, first of all, the water response team is a local entity?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So each conservation authority that's involved in the program has a local watershed response team. That way we can look at what the local interests are. Mm-hmm. So we make sure that we have someone on the team that represents all the different sectors that are using water.
So when you say the local water users or local stakeholders, some of these would be large water users?
Yeah, the type of operations we're looking at. So we have representatives on the team from the sand aggregate industry, gravel. We have the vegetable producers. We have the greenhouse vegetable producers, the Huron County Federation of Agriculture. We also have the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. And we have 3 representatives from the municipalities that sit on the team as well.
Golf courses?
And yeah, thank you. Golf courses is one of them as well. Thank you.
Excellent. So basically you have that local team, and what kind of information do you give to that team?
So each month, staff at the Ausable Bayfield will go through and look at the precipitation for the previous month. We actually look at about 18 months in total. The previous, try to get an idea of the long-term trend. We also look at stream flows. So we're looking at, there are a number of thresholds and indicator values that we look to compare the current data to, and helps us drive our decision-making. What we're looking at mostly for low water response program is the previous 3 months of rain and what percentage observed we've received versus the normal. And that will dictate whether we move into a low water level condition or issue a low water advisory.
When we were talking about flood messages, you talked about different levels. With low water, is it the same thing? Do you have certain levels?
We do. So depending on, we always have to start at a level 1. There's a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. We start out at a level 1 when we have conditions that meet that criteria. And it can be either stream flow. We use the lowest average summer monthly flow. We typically use August as our indicator, and we compare the flows to that. And if it's below 70% of the lowest summer monthly average flow, we then have we can go into a level 1 or potentially issue that advisory. Likewise with precipitation, to get into a level 1, we were looking at the 3-month totals, and there's a 40% threshold, a 60% threshold, and an 80%. If we find ourselves at 80%, that becomes our level 1 indicator.
Okay. So how many levels do we have?
There's 3 levels, level 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. And so you mentioned level 1. What's the impact of a level 1 low water advisory? If you issue that, what's it telling me or telling a water user?
So the level 1 is issued to the water users to try to reduce water takings by about 10%. It's a target. The message is conservation and trying to conserve the water, and that message can go out to the general public as well, even though they don't have permits to take water, not considered water users in that sense. But it's a general conservation message.
So one of your main audiences would be those large water users that have permits to take water. They play a big role, but the public as well can play a role as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that level 1, it's not mandatory, but you encourage people to reduce that water use, reduce stresses on their water resources by 10%.
Yeah, that's right. We're oftentimes early on in a dry period. If we can start cutting back, conserving that water early, we may be able to alleviate water shortages later on in the season.
So hopefully you don't go up to a higher
That's
level.
the intent, to keep it or come out of a low water advisory.
Right, if you're able to reduce those stresses, either not go to a higher level or even go to a lower level.
Right, so if we go to a level 2, for instance, we're looking at 20% voluntary reduction.
So that's also voluntary as well? Level
Voluntary,
2.
yes.
Yeah. And so at that point you're asking those water users and public, anything they can do to help reduce their water use by 20%, that will reduce that stress.
Right, Tim.
Yeah. And one more level?
There is. A level 3 is the most severe. We have not gone to a level 3, or not officially declared a level 3. We've been in level 3 situations before, though. With level 3, you can start imposing mandatory water restrictions. It'd be the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change that would look after that role.
Okay.
But I think one of the key things is we want to try to address it at the level 2. So we actually have the Hay Swamp low water management area where we've had a couple meetings in the past now where we've brought the water users from that area to try to get them talking and thinking of what kind of plans can we do here to share this water and not have to go to a level 3.
You can't put lasers on a wolf.
So tell me about how it works in terms of the water response team, the information you gather and what you take to them and what their role is, and how does that all work when you're entering a lower water situation?
Okay, we report to our water response team monthly. So at the beginning of each month, the previous month's summaries will be available. We'll report and we'll make a recommendation to the water response team based on the data that we're seeing. And that recommendation takes into account certain things like, has it been drier the last part of the month? Or maybe it's been wetter the last part of the month, even though the numbers don't suggest whatever situation we're in. If we have to interpret that, we then make a recommendation based on what the information or data is telling us. We make that recommendation to the water response team, and it's up to them to vote on and decide whether we move into or out of a low water level.
Excellent. So if somebody wants to receive one of these low water advisories, so they know about being in these stressed conditions and knowing that they may need to do an extra bit to reduce their use, how can they get access to these low water advisories?
Well, through the watershed, the water response team is the ultimate vehicle for getting that information dispersed back to the members of those different sectors. But we have the information available on the web. The municipalities will get the information as well. You can go to www.abca.ca, and the information's there. There's a low water program that you can access there, and there's a dial that tells you the current watershed condition. You can go there. It'll also be a Twitter feed or a Facebook feed as well.
So social media, website, so the information is available to the public. And how do they make the decision, the water response team, how do they make that decision whether they're in a low water advisory situation?
Well, I guess again, it's more reliant on the data and the information that we're providing them. And there's some interpretation there because you may make decisions seasonally based on what the future demand of water might be or may not be. But we're relying on the data, relying on the stream flow data from our gauges. And I talked about this earlier in the year on the flood forecasting system. We have a monitoring network of stream gauges that we're measuring flow and precipitation at.
Are there things that people can do at home, at work, whether you're a large industry or an individual? What are things people can do to conserve water to reduce stresses on our important water supply?
So looking at some of the sectors of the water users that have permits to take water, a lot of the stress that we're seeing is on the surface water, the drawing of the water from the surface, the streams. So we're looking at ways to, I talked a little earlier about sharing water, or sharing the time that we're using the water. Also, the timing of irrigation. It's better as far as losing water to evaporation. It's better to water early in the day or later in the day. Another big thing to do is maintaining and checking equipment to make sure that you don't have leaks and you're not losing water that you're extracting. Excellent.
So there are some best practices that different industries can find out in order to achieve those 10% or 20% conservation measures during a period of low water. How do they find out about that? Is there a way that they can get that information?
Yeah, that information will come out through the water response team. So we'll put that information out, and it's up to them to get that message back out to their industry sectors. The other thing is we'll do media releases. When we enter into a level 1 or a 2 or come out, we will do a media release as well.
Excellent. Is there something I can do as an individual to cut back my water use so that I'm helping not stress our resources?
Yeah, there's lots of things you can do. One is just watching the amount of water that you use. Other things that you may not think about every day is, again, comes back to timing that you're using the water in your yard, for instance, or in your gardens. The collecting rain through rain barrels is really popular. Another one is even just leaving your grass a little bit longer, so it's not losing as much water to evaporation.
Excellent. And I think some of your communities in their local community-initiated watershed plans, they're doing some rain barrels and some other low-impact development ideas. So it sounds like whether you're a homeowner or a large industry at work and at home, there are ways you can reduce water use. Is there anything else you had? We've been talking about water, and on this warm day, I know it's there's a lot of water, and we need our water. Anything else you wanted to mention about low water advisory? If not, they can just find out.
Yeah, I would encourage to check out the website. And if there are questions from water users, whether it's residential or the industrial sectors that are using it that we work with as part of the water response team, feel free to call, send an email.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thanks to Davin Heinbuck. I have my water here. And I'll tell you, on this warm day, we need some water. And you at home and at work can reduce your water use. And visit abca.ca for low water advisories to find out when you're in a low water, when there's drought, and on the other side, as we talked about with Davin in a previous episode, you also have those times when there's too much water too fast and flooding, and flood messages are also available at abca.ca. You've been watching a feature we call Your Watershed Home. My name is Tim Cumming. I'd like to thank you for the time you've taken to watch this. I also thank Davin, our guest, and I thank your cable television provider for generously providing this opportunity to speak to you about protecting water, soil, and living things in your community. So thanks to FauxPop Media, to the Staysh, to Channel 1, and thanks to you.